Few partnerships in Indian advertising have stood the test of time, quite like the one between Bharat Puri and Piyush Pandey. A collaboration built on trust, instinct, and an unshakable belief in the power of simple human stories. From Asian Paints and Cadbury to Fevicol, their work shaped not just brands but the very fabric of Indian culture. Today on Media Dialogues with Storyboard18, we look back at that creative bond, the lessons it holds for the next generation of marketers, and the enduring legacy of the late Piyush Pandey through the eyes of his longtime partner and friend Bharat Puri. Hello and welcome to the show, Bharat. It's a pleasure to have you here with me today to talk about the one and only Piyush.
Absolute pleasure being here, Delshad. Not in the right circumstances, but he's a person who, to my mind, needs to be celebrated.
Just, very short while after Piyush passed away, and the absence is absolutely felt across not just the industry, but you saw that outpouring of memory, of grief, from people who were just audiences, or people who were just, have just watched his ads, to the people who have worked with him, his family, friends, everyone, Bharat. And we know about the bond that you all shared. There have been a lot of references to Fevicol taglines also to explain the bond that you and Piyush shared. So I want to start with where that bond started. I know it's a long way back,
yes.
So you are going to have to think all the way back to how this partnership, this friendship, working relationship as well started, and that Piyush from back then.
Our partnership, well, it started close to 40 years back. I was a young, inexperienced, wet behind the ears product manager, just starting at Asian Paints. India was also just beginning to change. This was this time when this television had just come up. There was this Hum Log and Bunyad and so on. I mean, people of that generation would remember. Suddenly, India was getting united by its national television, right? And obviously, local languages, especially Hindi, was slowly coming to the prime. And here was this young product manager doing his first campaign. And the agency presented, we loved the work, on Celebrate with Asian Paints. Now, but we said, listen, this is now the last time we're going to do stuff for the mass market in English. This has to be done in Hindi. And they said, oh, yeah, no problems. They come with this translation of Celebrate with Asian Paints. Asian Paints ke saath jashan manao. I said, listen, guys, who is translating this? And do you guys have somebody who has spoken or grown up speaking Hindi at home? And those days advertising was very anglicized. You had to speak the Queen's English. Most of the advertising was English. So they said, no, we've got this guy. He's the Hindi copy chief. And he'll come and don't worry, he will sort this out for you, so on. Who was the Hindi copy chief? Piyush Pandey. I mean, you can understand what advertising was those days. He was called Hindi copy chief. Okay. We had this conversation. I told him, he said, boss, I'm sorry. So on, leave it with me. And the fascinating thing, Delshad, was before I got back home, okay, there was already, he had rung up, left a message. My wife asked him to call me. I call him, he says, partner, I've cracked it. Har khushi mein rang laaye Asian Paints. So then I called my servicing team. I said, guys, this is going to be the new creative guy on Asian Paints. Oh, no. I said, guys, we're moving towards a different time and we need guys who understand the idiom. And that's when our partnership started, and we did a lot of work. In fact, a lot of the, while a lot of his wonderful work is spoken about, one of his first pieces of work that we did was for Asian Paints Pongal. This was the time we discovered Rajiv Menon as a filmmaker and we discovered A.R. Rahman as a music producer. And it suddenly became famous because those days the ad guru was Alec Padamsee, and he would do this yearly review. And in his yearly review of that year, he called it the best ad of the year. And suddenly Pongal was famous and so on.
And he was the god of advertising. Alec was considered the god of advertising.
And suddenly for him to say there is this Tamil ad, which is like the best ad that he's seen this year, that was an amazing event. And that was in my view, the not slow but fairly fast growth of Piyush as a creative. Whether it was on Asian Paints, whether it was on Luna, whether it was on Fevicol, and suddenly you saw somebody who understood what the common man felt, thought, and he was able to take everyday emotion and give it a twist, put humor into situations in a sense where the consumer said, this is happening to me. And I think that, I mean, when you said lessons for marketers, I think for lesson number one is never lose connection with your roots. Never lose. I mean, I remember the time he took me to Jaipur to show me his home, where he had grown up, so on and so forth. And then he also took me to have these famous Jaipur kachoris, saying, this is what, like, if you're in Jaipur, you must have this.
A taste of Jaipur.
The taste of Jaipur. And, this connection which he never lost, and he was never apologetic. I remember him and me partying in Cannes, and that year Cadbury won this, the best ad for this drumming gorilla. And here we were all celebrating, so on and so forth, etc. But the lovely thing was, Piyush was as popular with fellows there as he was here, because he was himself.
It was his spirit, always. Yes. But, Bharat, you've spoken about his rise as a creative. You also mentioned your reasoning for telling the team that we want Piyush on Asian Paints. It almost feels like it was instinctive. But that instinct perhaps just didn't come from the fact that he wrote a great line. Where else did that instinct come from? Where that was the start of this partnership?
I think there were two things. One is, very clearly, we were speaking the same language. When I was talking about the consumer and saying, like, when we were talking about celebrate with Asian Paints, we're talking about, at most festivals, Indians come home. The emotion of coming home is something that, like, is universal. It's not that it's only Indian. But to capture it with the Indian ethos, so on and so forth, so whether it was with the Pongal, we did that with the Durga Puja, then we did that with Diwali. And I think the rapport that was there, where he got it, yes, he was very quick in his turnarounds. The other thing which I must also, he really thought and owned the brand. So it's like, for example, and he had this habit which, and I'm not an early morning person, which he was. Those days were the days of landline. If your landline is ringing at 7 a.m. in the morning, it is Piyush Pandey with a new idea. So one day it's ringing and he says, partner, ab mera idea suno. And he had this idea of shooting in Pushkar for, by then Mera Wala cream had become very famous. But he had this idea of Mera Wala blue, where this lady finds this turban in Pushkar and she wants that as the shade in her house. He says, my problem is Pushkar is 2 days hence and that set, we can't ever build again. So we have to approve today and get filmmaker tomorrow and shoot in the next 2 days, which is all we did. From the time he spun out the idea to the film, it was exactly 7 days.
Wow.
But this was, because he was thinking the brand. He owned it. I mean, the best example is Fevicol. I always have said the best product management team on Fevicol are the two Pandey brothers, because they reject far, far more work than we have ever rejected, because until it meets their standard, it's not going to come to us. And I mean, this ownership for Piyush is, I think, possibly the only creative where I have approved ads on the phone. We were doing this again, Mera Wala Blue, when India, Sri Lanka, we lost to Sri Lanka. If we changed Mera Wala Blue to Unka Wala Blue and said, well played Sri Lanka, so on. I mean, in the night, I'm sitting in somewhere, he got a Sri Lankan jersey from Arun Lal in Calcutta, shot it, and next morning it was out.
Wow.
So I think his ownership of the brand, his connectedness, and his understanding of what you were trying to say of the consumer that we were talking to, and his responsiveness, I think all three made him like a, live wire.
Was that trust that you all had built? Was there any point in time where, not that you questioned it, but was there any point in time where you asked him, should we do this maybe, or should we do that? Are you sure? Was there ever any doubt or to any idea that Piyush shared with you, whether it was, at ungodly hours in the morning or night? Was there any time like that?
Absolutely, yes, Delshad. There were many times, you see, in a good partnership, you must disagree, right?
Exactly.
And you must, the only thing is, over time when you build it, it's in that same Pushkar ad in the Mera Wala Blue, we said, listen, it's becoming very predictable, because we've already done these earlier Mera Walas where, there is this person obsessed with the object because of the shade. Now, can we do something else? Can we put a twist in the tail? And, he was resisting it, and we said, listen, at least shoot it and then we'll see. And to his credit, he came back and said, actually, it's working with the twist in the tail better. I mean, the latest, you've seen the famous sofa ad of Fevicol, Sharmain ka sofa. It is a beautiful ad. It was actually first done with poetry. Both Mr. Parekh and me felt that Piyush, let's try it also with music, it may just lift. And he was said, no, the poetry is so beautiful, and we said, we agree, but let's see. He went back, and this is to credit to both Piyush and Prasoon. Prasoon did such an amazing sound that they came back and said, no, actually now it works better with the music. We want to do it with the music. So, I mean, there was always this, I mean, and I must tell you, Delshad, again, in a lesson, as you said, lessons for marketeers, when you're going to keep pushing the envelope, Piyush and me have also made lemons together. But we've taken it on the chin and never got into this, yeah, tumne ye kiya. We didn't get it right this time, let's move on. I mean, we must have made between 75 or 100 ads together. There are always bound to be some lemons. But the fact of the matter is to recognize that you've done that and moved on, and listen, if you've got 8 out of 10 right, don't worry about, don't sweat the stuff for the other 2.
Absolutely. One of the things that was, something that, you spent even a minute with Piyush, you know that he's an emotional man. And he said this multiple times, right, that he has never shied away from crying publicly, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with crying. I mean, if we openly laugh, why can't we openly cry? What moments have you seen where that vulnerability has surfaced, and which in a way has even maybe prompted you to open up, therefore, to emotions or whatever the situation may be?
See, Piyush was a very emotional person, and for example, I still remember I was having these very emotional farewells at Asian Paints. Now, this is 98, and Piyush was there at one of these sales conferences, so on, and both of us were sitting and crying together. And I mean, there are so many sales fellows coming to you and saying, like, I mean, all kinds of very, very kind things, so on and so forth. And he's saying, partner, tum kya kar rahe ho? And he's crying, and I say, partner, am I doing the right thing? I'm also wondering whether I'm doing the right thing with all of this emotion. So we've shared, like, on many such occasions, for example, whether it was, I mean, I still graphically remember the Asian Paints farewells, because he's sitting with me, and we were in Goa, I think, in one of these hotels, and it's late night, and he's sitting with me and saying, partner, are you sure you're doing the right thing? And I said, now I'm also like, but now this is the last of the farewell, so, arey tum ghabrao mat, front foot pe khelo. But no, he would, I mean, even in smaller things at home, so on and so forth, he will tear up very, very easily. And I mean, frankly, that's a sign of somebody who's very comfortable. I mean, when you can share vulnerability, it also shows a very high degree of comfort and a high degree of confidence in yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. What is perhaps something that I mean, I don't want to distill it down to everything into like a bullet-pointed lesson, but what would you take away from someone like that? He was, I mean, for 4 decades leading, I mean, the face of Ogilvy for many of those decades, face of Indian advertising. So many people looking up to him. This amazing body of work, but at the same time, this truly emotional person who tears up when he watches a film, or when he's sitting with you at a table in Goa and crying. What can we take away? What can we like
just think
understand
the power
from
of
that?
connectedness. I think he's, it's like, later when I was living and working in Zurich, where I was looking after global chocolate for Mondelez.
Yeah, and Europeans don't show emotion.
Correct. No, and we had this big, Cadbury equity meeting. Now I'm the global head and so on and so forth. So Piyush is also coming for the meeting, but because Mondelez is a big client, the overall global head of Ogilvy is also there, lots of senior fellows, and he turns to Piyush in the evening and said, Piyush, and Brits are always a little understated. I've seen a lot of relationships, but your kind of client relationships I've never seen. Because the fascinating thing was, Piyush was very clear, partner, ये सब जब हो जाएगा, मेरे को बाहर का खाना नहीं, मैं घर पे, please tell Alka, my wife, कि मैं भिंडी और दाल खाऊंगा. So घर जाके खाएंगे. And we sat on my terrace, I remember, till 2 o'clock in the morning, so on and so forth, like, as usual, share. And he had a one-liner for everything. I just think the power of connectedness, I mean, Delshad, ever since his unfortunate passing away, the number of people who have sent me condolences because we worked together with Piyush and now they don't know whom to send it to. but they are recounting incidents. But all of them are feeling that, listen, this is somebody we knew well, and this is somebody who we connected with who's gone. I mean, this is an amazing ability.
I'm talking about your take on him as a, not just as a creative person, but as a business leader.
I thought he had the wonderful instincts of a business leader and how to build a culture. I think what he built in Ogilvy, and without, putting all the fancy stuff around, the culture, he just built a very enabling, informal, merit-oriented culture, but where he stood up for his people as and when it was required. And I saw that, because again, we worked so long. I saw, for example, the coming of, say, Sonal, how he and Sonal were a wonderful combination. Sonal went off, I think, to Malaysia. Prasoon Joshi came on, so on and so forth. And I've seen him work with a whole set of fellows. I still remember we did a ceremonial lunch when I had become head of Cadbury, from marketing director to head of Cadbury. So we said, listen, Piyush, you and me need to step back and give the then marketing director, Sanjay, and Kidu, who was then now the national creative fellow, give them the space to do, otherwise we will, our shadows will be over everything. So we said, now the two of you have to take on things, so on. And he was willing to step back, and we said, listen, very happily, and step in whenever you needed him to. And I think that was an amazing ability. I've seen this with the number of creative people that he's nurtured over time. You've seen that repeatedly. I mean, yeah, and I mean, up to the last 2 years, I've seen young fellows, so on and so forth, whom we will encourage, push on. And now, they're good creative people in their own right.
They shine a light, empowering people. And you're right. I mean, it wasn't something, there was no fancy playbooks shared or,
Yes.
I think previously it was also mentioned, he used the word MBA Giri. It was not, he just did it.
See,
it was
his
instinctive.
two favorite bugbears were research and MBAs. Okay. Now I'm an MBA, so on and so forth. He said, "Yaar, tum us tarah ke MBA nahi ho, tum dil wale MBA ho."
What is a dil wale MBA?
Okay, but he would feel that there are these rational fellows. I mean, for example, he would narrate me instances where unnamed clients, but whom we can understand, who would want to discuss scene by scene objectives of a film. And he'd say, "Yaar, ye kar kya rahe? Inko kya samajh hai?" And, he would laugh and say, listen, these fellows I leave to other fellows. And the other thing was research. I mean, and his point on research simply was, listen, use it just as a overall light. Don't go literally and say that this line, no researcher is, no consumer is going to tell you that this line is better than that line, so on and so forth, etc. So research and this were two things that I remember. Anytime you want to have fun with him, you say, Piyush, yaar, research mein maza nahi aa raha hai tumhari ad ka. And then he will be most excited.
Brilliant. Before we started our conversation, we briefly spoke about the Cadbury crisis that had happened. Bharat, in instances like that, when there's a crisis of that proportion and impact, how important is it to have that partnership based on trust with your, whether it's your agency partners or even with your teams? And something that, the partnership that you and Piyush had in those moments of crisis for a brand, for leaders, how important is that? How does it play out?
I think it's incredibly, in my view, having been through that crisis, and you won't even wish it on your enemies, because it's really, I mean, I remember during that crisis, I was on, and those days, television was in its glory days. There was no digital. I was on national television 20 out of 30 days in the month. And you would have various fellows making all kinds of allegations, so on and so forth, and you later look at the... But at that point of time, the two most important things is keeping your team together and having in your corner a set of people who are there batting for you and clear that... I remember we all got together, and Piyush was part of that, and we said, listen, this can happen to anybody. But really what is going to distinguish us from everybody else is how quickly we get up, As he put it, har koi gir sakta hai, par hum kitni jaldi utھ ke phir bhagenge. That will be our mark. And the lovely thing was, for example, the idea of using Mr. Bachchan as a spokesperson actually came from a salesman in one of these meets that you were having in, I remember, outside Delhi. And I came back and told Piyush and Sanjay, who was my marketing director, and they said, Acha, let's think about it. They both came back in the evening and said, it's a good idea, let's fix to meet. And then we met Mr. Bachchan, I remember, and Piyush was there at 10 o'clock at night at his house, where we told him, Mr. Bachchan, for the first time, you have to be a brand ambassador. You're not a model. You have to look at the camera and say, I believe in this brand. So only if you believe in the brand, should you do this. And to make you believe in the brand, we want to take you to our factory, so on and so forth, etc. And the wonderful thing is, actually, the idea of shooting the first ad in the factory was Mr. Bachchan's. He said, listen, you should shoot the first ad here. I'm completely convinced.
Wow. Wow.
Now, all through this period, simple thing what Piyush would keep doing is every second, third day, he would ring me up and say, partner, ab kya ho raha hai? Kaun kya kar raha hai? Ye kar. And you know, there are various things that make the press, various things that don't. So you're leaning on him and saying, dekho, this needs to be handled. He will be there right in front, right there, side by side. So you know that, listen, this is somebody whom you can count on. And I mean, that again distinguishes, and you know, it also gives you, you know that these are partners for life.
Absolutely. Not a transactional relationship
At
in any
all.
way. Do you think that you whether it's something that you've observed currently with a new generation of marketing leaders or agency leaders, do you think that kind of sense of ownership and being accountable is even possible today? And the partnership, the kind of partnership that you and Piyush had as a marketer and a creative or an agency head, I mean, is it even possible at this point?
In my view, absolutely yes. I think all good work, it doesn't matter, even it's like, you know, forget even for a moment communication. If I have to do great innovation within my company, it's going to come out of a partnership between people. People who trust each other, people who are there for each other, and people who will hold each other when the other one falls. To my mind, I think being transactional, here I'm here for 2 years, let me, you know, make my 150, this is a T20 match. Finally, life is a test match. You're going to, you know, you're going to take some hits on. And when you take those hits, how you handle them is far more important than the 120 or 150 you score in a T20. So in my view, I think relationships still matter a lot. I mean, take Fevicol. I mean, the fascinating thing is, everybody thinks we have an ad budget in Fevicol 4 times the size that we actually do. That's a compliment to the creative. That's a compliment to the team that's working on Fevicol and to the Pandey brothers. And that's the power of a relationship. So to my mind, if anybody says, listen, the days of relationships are over, so on, it's very short-sighted. I think all great business finally is relationships.
Connections, absolutely. And that the joy of being together.
Yes. The joy, enjoying each other, and, you know, finally, you know, I still, whether it's chocolate or whether it's glue, we're not averting, you know, a nuclear crisis. We're not solving world hunger. We're just making people happy by eating a product they love or getting to stick things together, which, like, you know, again gives them pleasure. Let's not, like, you know, get carried away and therefore, you know, believe that there is something, there's a much greater life purpose that we are accomplishing.
Don't take yourself too seriously.
Absolutely.
He loved his, I mean, we know he loved his cricket, whether as a player or then, you know, the analogies. I myself don't understand too much of cricket, so I always had to do a bit of double take whenever he landed one. What were some of your favorite one-liners? And did you? I mean, I'm sure that you all spoke about sport and cricket. What were those conversations like? What were some of the iconic one-liners for you?
See, fortunately, I also love cricket and am an aficionado. So we would have a large number of these cricket conversations, and of course, all of his analogies finally will come down to cricket, right? It is like whether it is his 2 favorite lines, which is partner front foot pe khelo, okay, and take a fresh guard, you know, fresh guard lenge, phir se shuru karenge. Now, and he would use all of the situations. Now, whether it is Dhoni's captaincy, I mean, in many ways, if you ask me, he's the MS Dhoni of Indian advertising, because he's nurtured talent, but he's done a hell of a lot of good stuff himself also. So cricket was an essential part of everything, and you know, the sports field and business are not so different. There are lots of learnings from each, and he picked those up very well.
Did you ever tell him that he is the Dhoni of Indian advertising?
I think I probably did, yes. I said,
do you remember what his reaction to that might have been?
A hearty laugh. I said, this thing, and he would have narrowed some one-liner, like, you know, calling me something else, so on and so forth, and moved forward. He was not a fellow who, like, you know, took himself too seriously.
Bharat, one final question. If there was one thing that you'd like to share with, whether it's a new generation of marketers or creatives or creators, now that we talk about content in the digital space, for instance, and influencers and people creating every day, the moments that we spoke about that Piyush so well brought to life on for a mass audience. Every day we are seeing millions of pieces of content like that come out, slice of life and all of that. If there's a message to take away from Piyush Pandey's life and his times, because that it truly was the era of Piyush Pandey, what would that message be?
I think the message would be, keep it simple, connect strongly, and tell a lovely story. He did all these three things beautifully. He always kept it simple. I remember, he would always say, "Ye jo planning wale itne mere ko far rahe," he would say, the moment they start drawing circles, he would switch off. And he'd say, "Give me a 2-line, 3-line brief and that's it. Let's get very clear." So keep it simple, connect strongly, and then tell a powerful story. I think that works not just in communication, it works in life.
Absolutely, well said. Thank you so much, Bharat, for joining us. It was lovely chatting with you and remembering and celebrating Piyush.
Absolutely. He's somebody who deserves to be celebrated. I think he was larger than life. He lived life, on his terms. He lived life king size. He spread a lot of joy and laughter, and we should celebrate that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.